She was caught very early and didn't have to spend 3 days in the hospital.
And a lot of these stories stem from I was super sick. No doctor could figure out what was going on with me. They thought I had the flu.
It's fine. And so that is why it is so important that, one, you keep your blood sugar under control, because it does. The longer you're high, the more issues you have and your body starts breaking down.
It's not the easiest way of life. Like, it's just not. But I know that they're meant to be here and we are meant to be their caregivers. Hey, Palmr fam, I'm Rebecca,
And I'm Nick.
and welcome back to another episode with us, the Urgent Lows with Palmr. We're so excited to be here again and have you joining us. And today's going to be, I think, an important episode to have.
We had a lot of fun in the previous one, but we want to get real serious because this is a topic that is very important to me. We've touched on it before on episode 2 when we talked about my story. To me, it's very important that all parents know the signs of type 1 diabetes. It's something that I had no idea anything about. All I knew was my son was sick. We thought that maybe he had a cold, the flu or something. Called the doctor. The doctor thought, oh, he just had a cold. But there was a lot of warning signs leading up to his diagnosis that if I would have known about, things could have been different. And when I say different, not that he would not be a type 1 diabetic, but he went into DKA. His body was completely shutting down and he almost died. Where my daughter, because I knew all the signs, she was caught very early and didn't have to spend 3 days in the hospital.
Yeah. And I think something too for me as coming in to the family after both kids have been diagnosed with type 1, a lot of the people that we meet that have kids or are a diabetic themselves, I always ask them, like, tell me your diagnosis story. And a lot of these stories stem from I was super sick. No doctor could figure out what was going on with me. They thought I had the flu. I was losing a lot of weight. I just wasn't feeling myself. Like, I just felt off, but I wasn't testing positive for the flu or anything like that. So it's a lot of like the viruses, like you have a virus, you have a flu, you have a cold. And when you have all those things, what does the doctor order you to do? Get rest. Which in this case with Parker was what you were doing. And thankfully, because you mentioned one main clue that he had type 1 diabetes, but you didn't know at the time of something that he was doing that didn't seem to be very normal, that was the reason why the doctor prompted you to go to the ER immediately.
Yes. And that one item was an increase in urination. And so at the time, Parker was 2.5 years old. And I noticed that for a month or two before his diagnosis, he just started peeing like crazy and would pee through all diapers. I thought that every single diaper brand was a joke, none of them actually worked, and it just didn't make any sense. How can one little boy pee so much? And I believe I already told this story once, but I'll share it again. There was a story where I went to the mall to pick up something. I pulled up to the mall, got Parker out of the car seat, changed him to put a fresh diaper on him before I even walked into the mall. Go into the mall. I'm in there for maybe 5-10 minutes, and I start feeling warm liquid dripping down onto my shoes. When I look down, his entire stroller was full of pee. And like the little basket at the bottom had like an inch puddle of pee in there. I was like, how is this possible?
Yeah. But I think too, because at the time with Parker, that was your first child. So firstborn, your first time dad, Like, you don't really know. Oh, this must just be a baby thing. Yeah, you can call your parents and be like, "Did I pee a lot when I was a little kid?" And, like, I know that's, like, stuff that I do, like, now, like, anytime I have a question, I will call my mom, like, "Did I do this? Did I do that?" But it's really, like, it's just so I think what's so scary about it is that you can maybe rule out something as to be, like, normal or, "Oh, it'll get better," type of thing, and then that could be the one factor that make other people know, like, "Oh, wait, you might be a type 1 diabetic."
Yeah, and so for Parker, the day he was diagnosed, actually rewinding to the night before, I was putting him to bed and he starts saying, I'm thirsty. I'm really thirsty.
Mhm.
And so I was like, man, I really don't want to give him much water, if anything, because he's just going to wet the bed. Well, he recently got into a big boy bed, like a toddler bed, and I put him to bed and leave, and he is that gets up and is banging on the door saying, I am thirsty, I want water or
Yeah.
juice or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And at the time, I was just like, "What in the world?" I've never seen him do that. And that was the first kinda like, "Whoa, something's going on here."
Mhm.
And then the next day, we go to church, and he seemed like he was okay, and then all of a sudden, he just kinda takes this turn for the worse, starts, really not feeling well, went out to lunch. My parents were in town, and he didn't want nothing to do with my parents. He just wanted to be in my arms. And I remember holding him, and he almost felt lifeless, like, he felt like a rag doll, there was nothing in him,
Yeah.
and that was so scary, and so, remember put him in the car, driving home, he starts throwing up everywhere. I get home, put him in bed, call the doctor, and yes, the doctor was like, "Oh, it sounds like he just has the flu, a cold, let him rest."
Mhm. Were you
Just
giving him any medicine?
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, because medicine spikes the blood sugar.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, you never know if you were giving them medicine at that point, if that was, like, making him go even higher too, and you just didn't even know.
Yeah, and so, with all that, I remember just something came to my mind of you need to tell the doctor that he is peeing like crazy.
Mhm.
And at first you think, oh, that's so silly. Like, why? What would that have anything to do with it? But I did. And that's when the doctor was like, oh, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Immediately told us to go to the hospital, not any hospital, but a certain hospital that specialized in children.
Mhm.
Said, I'm almost positive your son is a type 1 diabetic. You need to get there ASAP.
Yeah.
His body is in complete shock right now, and he was on the verge of death with how bad it was,
Yeah.
with and how high he was for as long as he was.
So when you guys had Evie, so Parker already had type 1. When you guys had Evie, were how quickly or what age did you start, like, would you ever prick her finger randomly just to see
All the
or
time,
okay.
all the time. Like, you had that fear,
Yeah.
especially when she got to around the 2.5,
Yeah.
because that's when Parker got it.
Mhm.
She was diagnosed at 4. But, yeah, you start having that anxiety of that, and you're kinda looking, and anytime that she seems to, like, "Oh, is she peeing more than normal? Like, is this the beginning?" You kinda have that little bit of a panic attack.
And that's actually how she was first diagnosed. She had a weekend where she was peeing more than usual, and then their mom pricked her finger, right? And she was
Yes.
high.
Yep.
Like, I can't even imagine that feeling. Like, what did you feel? Were you like, "Here we go again, like, how is this real life?" Like
Yeah. I mean, my heart just sank at
yeah,
that point, and it was one of the worst feelings that I ever experienced
yeah,
because there was many debates on, "Do you have a second child?" And I didn't wanna bring another child into the world if I knew he was gonna have type 1.
yeah.
And the doctor made me feel good. It's like, "Oh, it's probably not gonna happen. Don't let that stop you.
Mm,
You have less than a 1% chance of that happening." And then to find out that, no, she has it, it broke me.
yeah. And I think that's something too that we can talk about is that I don't have any biological kids of my own. And that was something that's always been important for me. And, wanting to have a family and kids of my own. We had the conversation early on of I didn't know how it really worked. When we're like going into us dating, those are conversations I had to ask, and I, like, really didn't know how to ask them, but it's like, "Did the kids get type 1 diabetes because you carry a gene for it, or does the mom carry a gene for it?" Like, how does that work? Is there a way to test to see if you carry a gene for it? I see what Parker and Evie go through, and I also see what we go through as their caregivers. It's not the easiest way of life. Like, it's just not. But I know that they're meant to be here and we are meant to be their caregivers. I know that that's not by accident. We did figure out that there was a gene test, and Nick actually took that test, and it was like an at home kit that got mailed to us. He was eligible to take it because he has two kids with type 1 diabetes. So he took it, and then we got our results back, and they were negative for it.
Yeah,
So,
I don't carry the gene or
yeah.
whatever it is that they test for that. And I remember them saying there's like 2, I think there's 2 things they look for,
Mhm.
and you can become a type 1 diabetic even if you have 1. Most diabetics have 2, but every one that you have increases your chance. I didn't have any of those.
It's like an antibody? Is
Something
it
like
something
that.
like that? Yeah. So, if someone's listening to this and wondering what are other symptoms besides peeing constantly, being thirsty, what are other symptoms that could play out that could be type 1?
I pulled up a list, and I'm just gonna go down them, and we can discuss each one or much as we want, but, the first one obviously is, the frequent urination, but also an increase in thirst,
Mhm.
and it is just because when your blood sugar is that high, the only way for it to come down is to be peed out, and it also makes you thirsty 'cause your body wants to release as much fluid as possible, so you get very thirsty, and then you have to pee a lot.
Mhm.
So, and that was obviously the key one for us. And that typically is the number one early sign, from my understanding. But by no means are we experts, but from my understanding, that is the case. Another one is extreme hunger or even a change in appetite, unexplained weight loss. For both my kids, they've been very small and skinny their entire life.
Yes.
They are undersized.
Mhm.
Parker is probably the smallest kid in his entire grade.
Yeah. Height
And
and weight.
height and weight. I
Yeah.
know that when he was at the doctor, they did some like a bone test or something, and he is about 2.5 years. His body is as if he was 2.5 years
Younger.
younger. And I assume that might have to do with the diabetes side of things. We also have fatigue and unusual tiredness.
Which that one is so fascinating to me because before I met Nick and the kids, I was always around my nephews, and thankfully they don't have type 1 diabetes, but they're like go, 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 like never stop, never like I remember when they would like come over and like hang out with me, I'd be like, "Do you guys want to take a nap?" And they're like looking at me like, "Really? Like we're not gonna sleep in the middle of the day." It's like go, go, go. The amount of energy, I wish I had half of their energy. But with Parker and Evie, like, don't get me wrong, they definitely have their moments where they are like that, but there are definitely moments, and I see it more in Evie than I actually see it in Parker, of, like, you can literally go to Evie at any time of the day and be like, "Hey, do you wanna take a nap?" And she'll be like, "Okay," and she'll pass out, like, pass out. And she could have had, like, a great night of sleep the night before, so that is definitely something that I have noticed with the kids of they do tend to fall asleep on the way to school or on the way back home from school. Oh my god. I think we should talk about our first Valentine's Day dinner.
Whoa.
The fact that we made it through this dinner, I think we can make it through anything.
You are correct.
Yep.
And completely embarrassed, but yes, it was our first Valentine's Day. I had the kids that day, and so if I remember correctly, Rebecca was like, "Well, why don't we all go out together and we'll celebrate Valentine's the
Mhm.
4 of us.
Yeah, and I got Evie, like I think I got both kids stuff, but I got, like, Evie these, like, heart-shaped glasses. I was super excited to give to her, and
Yes, and you were trying to find a place because we weren't really planned, and, typically with reservations, you gotta get something well in advance, but we're also trying to think of something that would be, like, kid-friendly,
yeah,
and so we came up with going to Planet Hollywood
not
at
we. I would
Cat
say it was Nicholas.
Yes, I came up with the idea to go to Planet Hollywood at Disney Springs, and first off, the food was not good. I don't believe the service was pretty
I think
bad
it was
too.
the service. It took forever for us to get our drinks, to get our food, to get an appetizer, and that's why they started tanking. So I really
Right.
think that that's what it was. It was the timing of all of it.
Mhm.
I think, like, we got there and the kids were starting to, like, tank, right? They were, like, getting low, the alarms were going off, and we were giving them juice and gummies and all that.
But they
I
really needed food.
Yeah, and I remember we just kept saying, like, "Oh, like, we'll order an appetizer right away and it'll come in," and we even told the server, both our kids have type 1, like, "We need to get something, like, as soon as possible." I swear it was, like, an hour just to get their, like, lemonade. I'm not even exaggerating, it was that bad, to the point that Parker at one point just put his head on the table and just, like, went to sleep. He had been so low, like, obviously, we were managing it with the Gatorade and the dummies and stuff. His poor little body, like, he had been going low for so long, he it was past his time for having dinner. And he just put his head down and just went to bed, and then shortly after, he was doing the same thing, and Nick and I are looking at each other like, "What is this? Why did we ever think this would be a good idea?" And mind you, we're not married. We're just dating at this
Mhm.
point. It's our very first Valentine's Day, and it's wow. We made it out of it.
We did.
All alive, I'd love to say.
Anyways, I guess back to our list of symptoms. This next one is very fascinating to me. I've heard pretty much all of them. This is one I've actually never heard of before, but it is a fruity smelling breath.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one.
That is so weird. And I did Google it because I was like, what does this even mean? What this one website says is that if you or your child develops fruity smelling breath alongside other T1D symptoms, should seek emergency medical care immediately. These symptoms point to DKA, which, as noted, can be life-threatening for diabetics if left untreated. Since people with T1D can't use sugar for fuel, their bodies start breaking down fats instead. This produces a byproduct known as ketones, which can build up to dangerous levels in the bloodstream and urine. The body tries to clear excess ketones through their breath and urine, giving them a fruity smell. So fascinating.
Yeah, haven't heard of that one. I think one on this list that I really think we should hone in on because we've really had to experience it is the sudden bedwetting and then, like, kinda reverting, like, being potty trained and then, like, reverting backwards to not being potty trained because we had to deal with that.
First off, night potty training was very difficult
Yeah.
for the kids because of their diabetes.
Mhm.
But even to this day, we have, with my daughter, you know, struggles with it.
We have taken her over the past year and a half. We've taken her to all the doctors. She's gotten all the tests done. There's nothing physically wrong with her bladder. No one seems to be able to figure out what is the case. Any sudden movements, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, typically for kids, it's like if they're having way too much fun, they don't want to stop kind of thing. And yes, she has that at times. But it's like the other day we were bowling as a family and she had just gone to the bathroom and then she bowled and then she came up to me and she's like, I feel like I like peed my underwear. So then I was like, okay. So then we went to the bathroom and she did. It wasn't like full blown, but it was definitely like, it was definitely wet. And it's just we've had it at all times, so we really can't make sense of it because it happens when she's high, it happens when she's low, it happens when she's at a perfect sugar level, so we really and even the doctors don't really know if they can directly pinpoint it back to the type 1, but it was something that we had to deal with because it's at one point, she, like, reverted backwards. she didn't know almost like how to go to the potty by herself and like do all that.
And that has also affected another one that was on this list, which is actually yeast infections.
Yes.
And that is something that my daughter has definitely struggled with
Yeah.
quite a bit. And and then also slow healing wounds in general. And so she has had quite a few yeast infections,
Mhm.
and they have always been a struggle for her and even the process of healing her from them.
Yeah. And then another thing that both kids, but I think Evie has a more, is the styes underneath her eyelid. So typically theirs are at the bottom of their bottom eyelid, and those styes are so stubborn.
Yeah.
Well, when I first met Nick and the kids, I noticed that they had a lot of styes, more than usual. And then one night, I just like randomly Googled, do you get styes from type 1 diabetes? And it's a direct link to it. But yeah, even if they get ointment and medication from the doctor, it still takes weeks for these styes to go away for them, and then they so quickly reappear again.
Yeah, it is a struggle, and that's all part of that slow healing wounds.
Yeah. And it's just like amazing what the body takes on. We talked about it earlier. You know, when you're low, it's kind of like that immediate, like you have to have an immediate response, but the highs too. The highs is overall like things are building in your body and things are breaking down when you're so high. And the sty, for example, is one of them. If they've been high for too long, for too many days in a row, like they will get a sty very quickly.
And then the last one we have on this list is blurred vision. And I know I actually just took the kids back to the eye doctor. It is very important that kids go to the eye doctor once a year. My kids have been going, they just had their annual checkup and had a great conversation with the eye doctor. And he actually explained to me why it is so important. What diabetes does is it really starts damaging the body, especially when you've been high, and it really affects, I guess, the blood vessels. And when you dilate your eyes and the eye doctor is able to look into the eyes and see all the blood vessels, if the blood vessels in the eyes are messed up and damaged, then it's that way for the entire body.
Hmm.
But if they look good in the eyes, then the rest of the body is fine. And so that is why it is so important that one, you keep your blood sugar under control because it does. The longer you're high, the more issues you have, and your body starts breaking down. And it is directly linked to your eyes.
All right. So if someone is listening to this episode and they're wondering, my child might have a few of these symptoms that we've talked about, what's a good way to how they can check to see what's going
Yes.
on?
If you know someone who is maybe a type 1 diabetic, they will most likely have a, a tester, and maybe you go have them check it, right? But a lot of people don't have one of those laying around. What I would really, I guess, truly recommend is if you feel like it's getting out of control, that there's a lot of these signs. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean
More
they had,
obvious.
yeah,
Yeah.
more obvious is, schedule that appointment with your primary doctor.
Hmm.
Have them go in, talk to them about the symptoms, but make sure you tell them, my concern is type 1 diabetes
Yeah.
because of XYZ,
Hmm.
and make sure they do a blood sugar test. That is the most important thing because most of the time when you go into a doctor and you're sick, they don't check your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Very rarely do they ever do that. And so that's the one thing I would actually point to is please, please ask your doctor to do a blood sugar test. And there's multiple ways to do it. I remember one time sitting down, it was a nurse. I think it was actually when my daughter had a UTI
Hmm.
and she had to go do a pee test.
You could see it through her. Yeah.
Yeah, and
The urine sample.
it was so funny because the nurse did not read her chart
Heart.
yet. It
Yes.
comes in
Like frantic.
frantic, and it was like, "So, I'm waiting on the doctor, but, there's a lot of concerns with the results of the pee, like, there's a very large high number of, like, the blood sugar in their pee is high." I go, "Yeah, she's a type 1 diabetic." She goes, "Oh, she is? Oh, thank God. Oh my God." And, like, she was just like this whole thing because she's like, this kid's diabetic. They don't know yet. I'm gonna have to break this news.
That was a whole interesting visit. So I guess to close this episode, if someone just getting a new diagnosis, what message do you have for them? My little side message would be, I'm so sorry. We are here. We understand. No, I wasn't in the kid's life when they first got diagnosed. No, I wasn't in Nick's life when they were first diagnosed. But I did come into their life, and for me, it was like getting a brand new diagnosis times 2 because I knew nothing about type 1 diabetes. So I had to go through the motions of learning the equipment, learning how to read things, learning how to carb count, learning all the things that go into type 1 diabetes, and feeling like, am I ever going to be good at this? Like, am I ever going to be a natural at this? I feel you, and I just if there's one thing I can hone in is that let perfection go out the door because perfection does not exist. Type 1 diabetes has a mind of its own, and if you're trying to keep it perfect, you are going to run yourself down to the ground, and you're not gonna be there to help your child. So, make sure you remember that this is not about being perfect, and also, you have to remember to take care of yourself because if you don't, once again, you're not gonna be there to be able to take care of your child.
Know that it is going to be devastating. It is going to be hard. As a parent, it is going to rock your world. There's no other way to say that. The one biggest advice, and this is something I did not do, and if I could go back, I would do it completely different, is you have to get connected with other families with type 1 diabetes. That has been the game changer for us personally over the last few years, but my son is going on 10 years of having it, and I only knew one other family. Like, somebody was like, "Oh, I know somebody has a kid with type 1," and connect me with that one family, but I didn't know anybody else. I never got involved with any organization at all, and there's a lot of great ones out there. Obviously, you have people like, the what used to be JDRF, Breakthrough T1D. They have pretty much chapters all over the United States. Here in Orlando, we're obviously very connected with Touched by Type 1, and they have been absolutely amazing. The people and the families that we've met through them.
Mhm.
And I even if you're not in Orlando, I highly recommend you go on Touched by Type 1 website. They have something called the D box that is designed for families with a newly diagnosed child and even adults actually. They have multiple versions of the box. And you don't it's not like you have to be diagnosed like right then. I think they say like if you've been diagnosed within the last year, you go on, you put in your information, and they will ship you this box. And it is completely free.
So many amazing resources are a part of this box.
A lot of education
A
and all
lot of
that.
educational. It's just so many resources when you're feeling so alone and like who am I going to go to?
Mhm.
Who can I lean on for this? This D box is
Yeah.
the answer to a lot of it.
And I have found, and obviously this is not, I'm sure, for everybody, but for the most part, everybody you'll meet in this T1D community is amazing. And they know exactly what you've gone through because they've done it,
Mhm.
and they will be there for you.
Mhm.
They'll give you their number a lot of times and say, text me, call me if you need help or you're struggling or whatever, need advice or all these things, because that first year is hard.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had somebody I could have called and picked their brains outside of the doctor, right? Usually that you do have like a hotline you can call for help because you're going to need it. But to have somebody that you can go sit down with and have a conversation and text and call, that is so important. And you find those through getting connected with these different communities.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for tuning in again. I hope you found this episode to be helpful, and we can't wait for the next one. Bye, Palmer fam.
Bye.